At 2:46 in the morning, the courthouse service elevator stopped at floor 0. There is no floor 0 in that building. The panel goes from basement 1 to lobby. No missing button. No blank plate. No space between them where another floor could fit. I was called because the controller had recorded an unscheduled stop between those two levels. I thought it was a position sensor fault. Then the floor indicator changed to 0 while I was standing inside the car. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. There was a corridor on the other side. Fully lit, gray courthouse carpet, fluorescent ceiling panels, office doors numbered 1 through 8. The corridor extended farther than the outside wall of the building. I knew that before I measured it. The elevator shaft sits less than 8 feet from the courthouse's eastern wall. The corridor in front of me was at least 100 feet long. The strangest part was not that I could see it. The strangest part was that the doors had opened normally. The sill was level. The door locks showed a valid landing. According to the machine, that floor belonged there. Let me tell you what the building is, because the whole thing depends on the geometry being ordinary. It's a 12-story municipal courthouse annex downtown, occupied all day, maintained, nothing dramatic about it. Below the lobby there are 2 basements, basement 1 and then basement 2. Above the lobby, floors 2 through 12. Basement 1 sits directly below the lobby. The vertical gap between them is 14 feet, normal for that building. There is no mezzanine, no hidden landing, no skipped number. The service elevator runs the full height. Its controller holds a destination table, which is just the list of stops the machine is allowed to make. There is no floor 0 in that table. There is no address for it. There is no button and no programmed stop, because there is nothing there to stop at. That's the part I want you to hold on to. Not a haunted building. A machine that was asked to go somewhere that doesn't exist and did. So the first thing I did was the thing you always do. I looked for the boring answer. I've serviced elevators for over a decade. Most of what looks impossible at 3 in the morning is a loose connector or a miscalibrated sensor. You don't get excited. You work the list. First guess. An incorrect display label. Somebody sets a display to draw the wrong character and a 0 shows where a B1 should. I pulled the display mapping. Every floor mapped correctly. There was no entry anywhere that produced a 0. The character it had shown me wasn't in the set it was allowed to draw from. Second guess. A position encoder fault. The encoder counts the car's movement and tells the controller where it is. If it drifts, the car can think it's level when it's a foot off. But drift gives you a real floor in the wrong place. It doesn't invent a landing that was never in the count. Third, controller memory error. Bad memory throws garbage into a log. I checked the event record against the drive record. They agreed. 2 separate systems had both recorded a stop at 0. A corrupt byte in one doesn't get politely confirmed by the other. Fourth, a false door zone signal. The door zone sensor tells the controller the car is level with a floor and it's safe to open. A false one could, in theory, let the doors open between landings. That was the only guess I couldn't kill from the log alone. Every ordinary cause failed for the same reason. They all explain a bad reading. None of them explains a set of doors physically opening onto a lit hallway. So I stopped reading logs and I got in the car. I put the elevator in manual service mode. That's where the tech drives it directly with a key and a switch at slow speed, ignoring passenger calls. It gives you full control, and it makes the machine honest with you because you're commanding every inch. I keyed it down to basement 1 first. Clean stop. Concrete storage cages, the smell of a basement. Normal. Then I commanded the lobby. The car started up, and it stopped before it got there. The indicator changed to 0. The doors opened. Same corridor, gray carpet, fluorescent panels, the flat institutional light every courthouse uses. A row of office doors down the left side, closed, each with a small number plate. 1, 2, 3. Running away from me down a hallway that had no business being on the other side of that wall. I did not walk into it. I want to be clear about that. I'm not brave and I'm not stupid. I stayed in the car with my hand on the door open control. But I had a laser rangefinder on my belt, the tool I use to measure shaft clearances, and I raised it and put the dot on the far end of that corridor and pulled the trigger. The reading came back, more than 100 feet. The eastern exterior wall of the courthouse is less than 8 feet past the shaft. I have measured that shaft. There is not 100 feet of anything in that direction. Past 8 feet you are outside, over the sidewalk, over the street. The corridor didn't care. I closed the doors and rode back down to the lobby, and the lobby was exactly where it should be. And the doors opened on the marble and the night shift security desk, and a guard reading his phone who had no idea anything had happened. That's when I called Lena. Lena's the facilities engineer for the annex. She knows that building down to the rebar. She's practical, she's skeptical, and when I told her what I'd measured, she said flatly that a rangefinder can throw a long reading if the beam catches a reflective surface and bounces. Which is true. That's a real failure mode. So she came down at 3:30 in the morning to prove me wrong, and I was glad because I wanted to be wrong. We rode it together. I keyed the lobby. The car stopped short. The indicator went to 0. The doors opened on the corridor. Lena didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked at it. Then she took the rangefinder and shot it herself. 3 times at 3 different points, the floor, a door frame, the far wall, so no single reflection could fool her. 104 feet, 111, 119 at the far end. There's a reflective surface, she said, but she said it the way you say a thing you've already stopped believing. And then, while we were standing there, the ceiling lights farther down the corridor switched on, not all at once, in sections. One bank, then the next, marching a little deeper into a hallway that already went too far. Nobody flipped a switch. There was no one in the corridor. We watched it light itself down past where the building's outer wall should have been, and neither of us saw a single person. Lena lowered the rangefinder and looked at me. "That's not a reflection," she said. "That's a distance. If those numbers are real, we can prove they're impossible without ever touching the corridor. We measure the outside." That was the right instinct. Everything so far had happened inside the car, at the doors, in a place neither of us could trust. But the courthouse footprint was a thing you could stand on. If the corridor was 100 feet long, it had to go somewhere, and there was nowhere for it to go. We synchronized 2 radios and agreed to timestamp every reading against the same clock, so we could line the measurements up afterward and be sure we were describing the same wall at the same instant. Lena took the rangefinder up to the lobby and out through the east doors onto the street. I stayed on the roof of the car, in the shaft, at the elevation where floor 0 kept appearing. I put the reference point on the inside face of the eastern shaft wall, the wall the corridor opens through, and measured straight out to the building's exterior. 7 feet, 9 inches. I called it to her over the radio with the time. She was standing on the sidewalk on the other side of that same wall. Beyond the exterior masonry, there was 11 feet of sidewalk to the curb, then the parking lane, then a lane of live traffic, then the far curb, and beyond it the front steps of the county records building across the road. We laid the 2 measurements against each other, foot by foot, timestamp by timestamp. A corridor 104 feet long, starting at that shaft wall and running east, would pass through the exterior masonry, cross the entire sidewalk, cross the parking lane, cross a lane of live traffic, cross the far curb, and end somewhere inside the records building across the street. Lena stood on that sidewalk in the dark and looked at the blank eastern face of the courthouse and told me over the radio there was nothing there. Solid stone, windows where windows should be, a wall she had walked past 1,000 times, no corridor, no light spilling out, no 100-foot hallway hanging over the street. The exterior was completely ordinary. The corridor was not hidden somewhere else in the courthouse. There was no direction it could run without leaving the building entirely, and from the outside, the building simply ended where it always had. She came back in. Neither of us said much. We had just proved the corridor was impossible, and proving it hadn't made it go away. "Okay," she said. "Now show me the shaft. I want the wall it opens through." I put the car in inspection mode, which lets us run it slowly from the top, and we climbed onto the car roof with the controls and the work lights. This is routine for us. Guide rails on either side, the counterweight in its own track, the landing doors set into the concrete wall at each floor, each with its interlock and its sill. We ran the car down slowly, past the lobby landing, into the space between the lobby and basement 1. The exact elevation where floor 0 should be. There was no landing door. There was no door frame, no sill, only reinforced concrete, poured continuous, the same gray surface that runs the whole height between the lobby and the basement. No gap. No interlock, no wiring, no landing circuit of any kind. The things that have to exist for a floor to exist were simply not there. Lena put her hand flat on it, then knocked along its length, the way you sound a wall for a void. No change in tone. No hollow. It rang solid the whole way across, mass behind mass, exactly what a foundation wall should sound like. I ran the work light along the seam where the wall meets the rail bracket. Undisturbed. That concrete had been poured decades ago and never touched since. There was no opening. There had never been an opening. While we were down there, Lena asked the two questions a careful person asks last, not first. Whether anyone could have left the car parked mid-shaft in service mode earlier, so the log read strange. And whether there was old programming buried in the controller from some past renovation, a floor that used to exist and got renumbered. Both were worth checking, so we checked them. The car had been in normal automatic operation all evening. No one had it keyed into inspection before me. And the controller carried a clean revision history, no orphaned landing, nothing removed that could leave a scar shaped like a zero. Nobody had left this behind. We stood on the car roof at the precise height where I had watched a 100-foot corridor light itself up, looking at a solid wall. Then we climbed back inside, closed the roof hatch, took it out of inspection, and I keyed the lobby again. The car rose. It stopped short. The indicator went to 0. The doors opened onto the corridor, same carpet, same lights, same office doors. We had just had our hands on the wall. From the shaft side, solid concrete. From inside the car, the doors opened onto an open floor. The same 3 feet of space was a wall and a doorway at once, depending on which side of the car doors you stood. I've thought about that a great deal since, and I still can't set it down anywhere in my head where it stays flat. Lena is not a person who spooks. She went quiet in a way I didn't like. Then she said, "Test the doors. I want to know what the machine thinks is out there." The elevator's doors won't open unless the controller is satisfied there's a real landing on the other side. The door zone sensor confirms the car is level with a floor. And there's the landing lock circuit. I want to be precise about the landing lock circuit. It does not see the door. It does not look through the wall and confirm there's a threshold. It's simpler than that. Every real landing has a safety contact, a physical switch that closes when that landing's outer door is present and shut and locked. The circuit reports one thing only, whether the contact assigned to that landing is closed. When it's closed, the controller trusts that a real, locked door exists there, because on every floor that was ever built it does. Floor 0 has no assigned contact. There is no outer door in that shaft, nothing for a contact to be wired to. And the controller was reporting a closed landing lock contact for floor 0. A closed contact that should not exist on a landing that was never built, wired to a door that isn't there. I went at that chain directly. I disconnected the normal landing call inputs. Every button, every call source that could ask the elevator to stop at a floor. If floor 0 was being requested by some stray signal, killing the call inputs should starve it. Floor 0 still generated a valid door zone signal. The controller still reported the car level with a landing at that elevation, and the landing lock contact for floor 0 still read closed, present, secured, safe. There is no door in that shaft. We had just touched the blank wall where it would have to be. And the one circuit whose entire job is to swear there's a real locked door out there was swearing to it. I did one more thing, because I wanted something I could carry out of that car in my hand. I keep a stick of removable inspection marking compound in my kit, a soft gray paste we use to mark surfaces we'll clean off later. I laid a clean line of it across the interior door sill, edge to edge, so anything crossing that threshold would disturb it. Then I keyed the lobby again, let the doors open on the corridor, held them a few seconds and closed them. When I looked at the sill, there was dust on it. A fine gray stone dust drifted across my marking line, thin but unmistakable, as if it had settled out of the air at that threshold. Lena and I went at that dust the way we'd gone at everything else. We compared it against every material we could reach. The courthouse concrete, basement dust off a ledge, tile grout from a seam, the backing fiber on the corridor's own carpet, the exterior masonry Lena had stood next to on the street. It matched none of them. The concrete was grayer and coarser. The grout was whiter. The masonry left a reddish grit. This was a pale, dry, fine mineral dust, the kind you'd get off old cut stone dressed and worn smooth over a long time. Nothing in that building sheds it. It was ordinary. That's what I keep telling people. It wasn't glowing, it wasn't strange under light, it didn't do anything. Just plain stone dust from a place that isn't in the building. I bagged it. I still have it. It hasn't told me anything, and it hasn't stopped being real. By then, I wanted to stop describing what the machine did and start measuring it, because measurement is the only thing that survives a night like that. Here Lena took over because independent instruments were her trade. Before the next run, she rigged the shaft. She fixed a small magnetic inspection camera to one of the guide rails, at the elevation where floor 0 kept appearing, aimed square at the car frame. It ran to her tablet and did not touch the elevator's own electronics at all. Our own eye in the shaft, answerable to no one but us. Then she set a fixed laser reference, mounted off the rail, its dot on a marked point on the car frame, so any real vertical movement would show as the dot sliding off the mark. And she started an independent travel timer, her own stopwatch, tied to nothing but her thumb. Now we had two separate accounts of every trip. The controller's account, what the machine believed it did, and the physical account from a camera, a laser dot, and a stopwatch that owed the elevator nothing. I keyed the lobby. The car started up and stopped short, and the indicator went to 0, and the doors opened on the corridor, and this time we watched the numbers instead of the hallway. The controller's trip distance field, its own record of how far it had just carried the car, climbed past 100 feet. Between basement 1 and the lobby, a gap that is 14 feet tall. The ride took close to a minute. Lena's stopwatch confirmed it. And on Lena's camera, the car barely moved. The laser dot crept off its mark by an inch or two and stopped. The steel body of the car, on the independent video, inched, then held. It never left the gap between basement 1 and the lobby. We could see it sitting there, right where it had always been, while the controller filled its log with 100 feet of travel. The controller's calculated travel and the independently observed physical movement disagreed, and there was no honest way to make them agree. The machine's own account of the distance said more than 100 feet. The camera, the laser, and the clock said a foot or two. The machine was counting 100 feet of hallway that only exists on the other side of the doors, counting it as real elevator travel, and it was completely calm about it. Before I forced the car to behave, Lena did something with the destination table because she wanted the electrical picture nailed down cold. She pulled the active destination table clean before any floor zero event and saved it. It listed exactly what it should: Basement 2, Basement 1, Lobby. Floors 2 through 12. No destination 0, no landing address for it, no door zone address, no landing lock contact. As far as the permanent table was concerned, floor 0 did not exist in any form. Then she watched the table live while I ran the car and read it out as it happened. The moment the car stopped and the indicator went to 0, a destination 0 appeared in the active list. A valid door zone status for it appeared. A closed landing lock contact appeared. For as long as those doors stood open on the corridor, the machine treated floor 0 as a properly mapped, fully addressed, perfectly safe landing, indistinguishable from any real floor in the stack. And the instant the doors closed, all of it vanished. Destination 0 gone. Door zone status gone. The landing lock contact gone. The active table went back to exactly what she had saved, as if nothing had ever been added. The permanent table never changed. Not yet. These were temporary entries, blooming into the machine's memory for the length of a stop and then withdrawing without a trace. "It's not corrupt," she said, staring at the tablet. "Corrupt data doesn't clean up after itself. This is arriving, and then it's leaving." That was the point where I decided I wanted the car forced to behave. Every elevator has fire service recall. In a fire, a switch sends the car straight to a designated level, no stops, and holds it there with the doors open so firefighters can take control. It is the most authoritative command the machine obeys. It overrides passenger calls. It overrides destinations. It cancels whatever it was doing and returns directly to the recall level, which for us is the lobby, and then it parks and waits. There is no stop between. There is no discretion. That's the whole design. I activated fire service recall to the lobby. The car began returning toward the lobby, and it stopped between levels. The indicator changed to 0. The doors opened onto the corridor, but the corridor was not the same as before. More of the office doors were open now, doors that had been closed on our first trip standing ajar, dark inside. The lights ran farther down than they had, deeper than 100 feet, the corridor longer than the last time, as if it had been extended while we weren't watching. There were no people. I want to keep saying that because it matters. We never saw a person. Nothing walked. Nothing waited. Just a hallway, lit and empty and impossibly long. And on Lena's camera, the same as before, the car sat physically between the normal levels. The recall had not moved it to the lobby. It had stopped it in the gap, at the elevation of a floor that isn't there, while the controller reported it had obeyed. At the very far end, past all the open doors, there was a wall clock. The round institutional kind bolted up in every government hallway. Lena raised the rangefinder, used it as a monocular and read the clock. It showed the correct time, our time. The current minute matching the watch on my wrist and the timestamp in the controller. She lowered the rangefinder slowly. "That's not a picture," she said. A stored image would be frozen. An old recording would be stuck in its own minute. That clock is keeping our time, right now, to the minute. The corridor wasn't a memory of something. It wasn't a photograph the machine was projecting onto the doorway. It was a place, and it was there, running along in the same present we were standing in. I closed the doors. Fire recall or not, I closed them. There was one test left that I trusted, and it was the one I'd been avoiding, because it takes the machine's own hands off the wheel. I was not going to shut the whole elevator down. If I killed everything, the controller would go dark and the doors would die with it, and I'd learn nothing. I needed the machine awake enough to talk to me and helpless to move at the same time. So I isolated the traction drive, and only the traction drive. I opened the machine room and disconnected main motor power at the source. I verified the motor contactors were physically open, the big switches that let power reach the motor, standing open with air between the contacts. I verified drive power was gone from the motor side. And I confirmed the brake was set. The brake on that machine is a spring-applied clamp that grips the sheave when power is removed. With no power, the spring holds it shut. The car is held, a piece of steel pinned in place by a spring the size of my forearm. But I left the controller and door circuits energized on their own supply so we could still read the system. The doors could operate. The car could not travel. The machine could still think, still log, still open its doors, still show me its readouts. But the one thing it physically could not do was move. No command, no signal, no fault moves a car in that state. Not a software rule. Physics. Lena confirmed it with me contact by contact. Open, open, brake set. Then she checked her own instruments. The camera showed the car at the lobby. The laser dot sat on its mark. Her own eyes, independent of the machine, put the car physically at the lobby, doors closed still. We stood in the machine room looking at the position readout, and the indicator changed to 0. The interior doors began to open. The car had not moved. It could not have moved. We had just verified with our own hands and our own separate instruments that every path to motion was cut. The brake was clamped. The motor had no power. Lena's camera and her laser both held the car at the lobby. The doors opened. And the lobby was not on the other side of them. The marble was gone. The security desk was gone. The doorway that a second earlier had framed the ordinary night now framed the corridor. Gray carpet, fluorescent panels. The office doors running away east into a distance the building does not contain. 0 car travel, and the floor had changed anyway. The elevator did not travel to floor 0. Floor 0 arrived at the elevator. I don't have a mechanism for that. I've laid it out for engineers who know more than I do, and none of them have one either. A car held by a set brake, its motor dead, verified motionless by an instrument that owes the machine nothing, opening its doors onto 100 feet of hallway that sits where a solid foundation wall is. The car did not go to the floor. The floor came to the car. Then the corridor began to change again, and this is the last thing it did, so I'll tell it carefully. The lights started going out, from the far end. One section at a time, the same banks that had switched on earlier, now switching off in sequence, the darkness moving up the length of the corridor toward the doors. But it wasn't like something walking toward us. There was no shape in it, nothing moving through it, no figure the dark was following. It was the corridor itself closing, shutting down section by section from the far end, the way you'd power down a floor at the end of a long day, folding the space up behind itself as it came. Lena was watching the readout on her tablet, and she said very evenly, "It's in the table." I asked what she meant. "The permanent table," she said, "not the temporary status this time. Floor 0 is listed as an active destination now, and it's staying. It wasn't there when I pulled the table at the start of the night. I saved that copy. I'm looking at both." She turned the tablet so I could see it. "And it hasn't replaced anything. Basement 1 is still there. Lobby is still there. Every real floor is still there. It hasn't overwritten a landing. It's inserted a new one between basement 1 and lobby." The machine had, at some point in that night, quietly added a floor to the list of places it was allowed to go. Not corrupted a floor. Not renamed one. It had made a new, valid destination and given it room in a gap that has no room. The dark was 3 sections away by then 2. I did not wait to see it reach the threshold. I put my hand on the door close control and I closed the doors. They resisted, for a moment. There was a pressure against them, not a hand, not a weight, just the doors themselves reluctant to travel. The way a door is reluctant when the air on the far side doesn't want to let it. It lasted maybe a second. Then they closed, fully, locked. And the floor indicator stayed at 0. I checked Lena's camera. The car was at the lobby, sitting exactly where the set brake had held it all along, physically, unarguably, at the lobby. I keyed the doors on inspection to confirm it, and they opened on the lobby marble, the security desk, the same guard, the ordinary night. But the indicator read 0. It read 0 for several minutes. A car sitting confirmed at the lobby, motor still isolated, brake still set, with a display insisting it was somewhere the building has no room for. And then, on its own, without any command from me, the display cleared and rolled to lobby, and the machine was ordinary again. We restored the drive. We ran it the rest of the night. Basement 2, basement 1, lobby, up to 12 and back. It stopped where it should stop, opened where it should open, and never once between the basement and the lobby. Whatever it had been doing, it was finished. By morning, the day staff started coming in, and the building did what it does. The lobby directory listed the floors, and it skipped from basement 1 to lobby, with nothing between them. The panel had no button marked 0. The shaft still held solid concrete at that elevation, and we checked, because we needed to. The exterior wall still stood less than 8 feet from the shaft, the sidewalk on the other side of it, and there was no 100-foot hallway anywhere in that direction, because there was nowhere to put one. The building was telling the truth it always tells. There is no floor 0, But I pulled the overnight controller report before I left, and I read it standing in the machine room, and I read it again, and I've read it many times since. It contains repeated stops at floor 0. It contains valid door zone statuses for a landing that isn't there. It contains valid, closed landing lock statuses, the contact swearing to a door that doesn't exist in the shaft. It contains more than 100 feet of controller-recorded travel. And against all of that, Lena's independent instruments recorded only minimal shaft movement, a foot or two, because the car never actually went anywhere. That's the thing I keep coming back to. The elevator didn't malfunction. A malfunction is a machine failing to do its job. This machine did its job exactly. It went to a floor, it confirmed the landing, it confirmed the lock, it opened the doors, and it logged the distance. Every step of that is a machine working correctly. It just worked correctly on a floor the building cannot contain. By morning, the directory still skipped from basement 1 to lobby. The elevator did not. It had recorded 118 feet of travel through a floor the building had no room to hold.